Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wish to thank the Honourable Member for the question. Let me, from the beginning, Mr. Speaker, thank the Honourable Prime Minister for his continued commitment to the development and improvement of services in the rural areas of Fiji, particularly in terms of utilities and the provision of its necessary services. So I wish to again acknowledge the Honourable Prime Minister for his continued commitment from day one, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we all know that water is important. It's a basic need, and there are policy documents that guide the work being undertaken in the ministry as well. And I wish to acknowledge the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Kulitangan, and his team in the Ministry of Rural Development, particularly the Research and Development team, for presenting facts and justification to the Minister of Economy, and thus led to the allocation of this provision in the 2021-22 national budget for the continued improvement of water and sanitation in rural Fiji, Mr. Speaker. Again, we are guided by the Constitution, Section 35 and 36, Mr. Speaker. And of course, here with me is an interesting report by WHO and UNICEF on this is a joint monitoring program for water supply and sanitation globally, and then coming down to the region, and of course for Fiji specifically, we also have interesting information. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I am quoting from the findings of the 2017 census report, although we acknowledge that there has been recent reports made recently, but again highlighting key areas, Mr. Speaker. Let me say that in the census report that I was referring to, about 85% of the rural households are connected to metered tap water, while 10% rely on high-risk water source. And this was the argument and the justification that was made to the Minister of Economy. Two major reasons, Mr. Speaker. So one is high-risk water source, and the other one is high-risk sanitation. There is a strong link between the two, Mr. Speaker, because the availability of water in large quantities is a precondition for adequate sanitation. And of course, in realizing this work, government provided this entitlement and this investment by the Fiji First Government will for rural Fijians the right of access to clean and safe water in adequate quantities and access to adequate sanitation facilities, as stated in the Constitution that I have referred to earlier, Mr. Speaker. High-risk water source. This is categorized in terms of high exposure. We have a lot of open source, gravity-fed water systems in Fiji, and unfortunately, most of these are untreated water, Mr. Speaker. So we all know that. Even in my own village, we drink directly from the source to the pipe system into the village. And the risks of waterborne diseases, particularly LTDD, we have that information with the Ministry of Health, and we work together. And of course, this will also lead to the identification of the key priority areas for the allocation of this funding. For the high-risk sanitation facilities, Mr. Speaker, again related, water and particularly flush to pit latrine, pit latrine with slabs, pit latrine without slab, open pit, shared toilets, and water shield toilets as well, Mr. Speaker, sir. There has been a new design that will be used for this project once water is improved. The report that we have, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'll just quickly highlight from the census of 2017. It talks about areas in Namosi, in the Lome Vitis, Naitasiri, Kandavu, Ra, and Mbua. And with high-risk sanitation projects, Mr. Speaker, sir, the highly vulnerable provinces are Mba, Nandunganabosa, Maduata, Teilevu, Dakonro, and Ra. And this does not refer to any specific ethnic groups, but all the settlements and villages and the communities within these respective communities or geographical areas, Mr. Speaker. So in terms of high-risk water, that will be the focus. Namosi, Lomai, Viti, Naitasiri, Kandavura, and Bua, and of course with high risk sanitation projects. We have Mba, Nadungano, Osa, Maduata, Teleu, Dakonro, and Ra. Again, this may, but the identification and the allocation might be subject to further consultations too, particularly with the Ministry for Health, particularly with LTDD, vulnerable areas, Mr. Speaker. So that very briefly is the explanation in this allocation. But let me assure this August House that the Ministry again is prioritizing water and sanitation as one of its main development priorities for the coming years, continuing from the projects previously, and of course again thankful to the Honourable Prime Minister, ensuring that no one is left behind. People in the rural areas deserve good, clean drinking water, and this is undertaken by the Ministry, let alone the work that is also being undertaken by Water Authority under the Ministry of Infrastructure and Meteorological Services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.